All right, so welcome to, I think we were trying to figure out whether this was the 4th or 5th colloquium of the year, but
Jose, you need to stay over.
why do we bother with live streaming?
There we go, now people can see.
All right, so welcome to our Faculty of Education colloquium series, one of several that have taken place this year, our second to last one of the year as well, and coming all the way from one floor up is Dr. Paula Lee Kristmanson, who will be presenting on why should students in applied programs do international internships, insights from UNB teacher candidate experiences.
Thanks, Jose. Okay, I'm going to first of all acknowledge that we are on the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqey people. And I would like to say that one of the things I really love that Imelda taught me is when we show gratitude, we say, all my relations, so all my relations. And it reminds me to be thankful, and I'm going to do some thanking in a minute. But in that spirit of our ancestors, I do want to dedicate this talk. I thought that would be nice to someone who has come before me, my maternal grandmother, who was a teacher in rural Newfoundland in the 1930s, and who taught me the value of education, the value of positive relationships, and despite her propensity for worrying all the time, she taught me the value of stepping out of my comfort zone. And in true Canadian fashion, I'm going to apologize. I have a cold, so if I have to stop once in a while, I talk quite easily usually, but if I do have to stop once in a while, please forgive me and just know that I'm all right unless I'm on the floor. Okay, so I'm going to continue in that spirit of gratitude, and I'd like to thank Jose, I think, for accosting me in the hallway and asking me to do this presentation in the colloquium series. I usually come to them and I enjoy them, so I was honored that you gave me that opportunity. So thank you, Jose, for twisting my arm. I'd also like to, this is the part where your picture comes up. I'd also like to thank, I only wear this blouse, you see. That's the only blouse I ever wear. I'd also like to thank Carla Culligan, right here in the front. She was my research partner from the outset on this very interesting project. And we were inspired actually by Canadian colleagues who were presenting at a conference in Australia. And they were doing some similar, not the same, but similar work at McGill University. And both of us kind of looked at each other and we knew that UNB was embarking on this opportunity, and we looked at each other and kind of said, yeah, let's do that. Let's see if we can do that. So we both felt called to find out about the experiences of our teacher candidates in terms of their international internship experience. I'd also like to thank Catherine, who, if she didn't support this whole thing, it would have never gotten off the ground. And to, of course, Dean Sherman, who also was very supportive. So thanks, Catherine, very much. I think the Dean just got home from China, and she's kind of tired, so she's watching me live stream, I'm sure, or she will at some point. And lastly, but not, of course, the least important, are the teacher candidates who, over the last number of years, and will continue to this year, who shared their insights, their feelings, their thoughts, their challenges, and even some humorous stories along the way with us. I also want to recognize, and it's great that Josie's here, I didn't know she would come, but I do want to recognize the work of our colleagues at the University of New Brunswick. Many faculties are now embarking on international internships of various kinds. And as I say here in my notes, from our friends at Renaissance College, Josie Celia is here tonight, who have been on this journey for a long time, to more recent initiatives in other faculties. We have a wealth of knowledge, or a growing wealth of knowledge and insights to share. So I'm only one voice in this conversation, but I'm happy to share that voice with you this evening. And I really hope that those of you who had experiences with this will share some of your insights and comments after the talk. So there we go. I got through that. That was pretty good, huh? All right. if you would permit me to not read that, I'm going to say that this is the outline of the presentation. And Carl and I, this presentation is kind of a combination of a few different presentations we've done with some added pieces of my very own that I've added tonight. So I'm going to start with the why I'm interested in this topic. Bye, Catherine. So, oh my, so that looks good. I want to come look at it a second. Okay. So, why am I interested in this topic? Well, as some of you may know, I am passionate about teacher education and about second language teaching and learning. I have been fortunate to have many cultural and linguistic experiences, both in my own country and abroad. And those experiences have made me who I am today, in part. And some of these are depicted in these beautiful photos here. You could guess maybe what they are. I don't know if you can guess, actually. They're kind of mysterious, some of them. This one is a school in Estonia. I just found that one today, actually. I was looking for one in Estonia. When the faculty decided to take on the international internship initiative, I was drawn to the idea of talking to teacher candidates about their experiences. And looking through the lens of second language teaching and learning, I was also very, very curious about the experiences that these internships afford second language teacher candidates in terms of linguistic and cultural awareness. And that Carla and I presented for the first time last year, and we got a really good reception from the group, and I thought that I would focus on that a bit this evening. I had never explicitly compared my own experiences to those of the teacher candidates that we spoke to. But I know that they resonated with me. And I feel like as I reread all of these transcripts, that it more and more spoke to me personally and professionally. It resonated in terms of challenges, surprises, rewards, and just the overall experience. My work in the Faculty of Education and at the Second Language Research Institute of Canada, in addition to being personally rewarding, is also, in addition to being professionally rewarding, is also personally meaningful. And beginning this presentation by connecting my own passions and background just felt like the right thing to do. So thanks for letting me do that. I was only 18 in that picture, I bet you can tell. All right. Oh, I should have asked Alan Sears if he knew who that was.
Pardon me?
Do you know who that is?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll let you think about that.
I should, but I don't.
All right. To briefly set the context of this research that I'm going to share with you, that's where the insights come from. The study was embedded within the international internships offered by the Faculty of Education here at UMB. These 8-week spring internships began in 2012, and our first pre-service teachers went to Shenzhen and 2 schools in Beijing. In the 3rd year of our initiative, we added a private boys' school in Colombia, and in this, the 6th year of the project, we currently have pre-service teachers in Colombia, and for the first time at an international school in Hefei. We are planning to meet with these teacher candidates, and actually I have a little preview because one of them let me share something with you this evening when they return, and many of them have already sent tons of updates and photos, which is wonderful for me. So, I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but there are some studies that we read in order to situate ourselves in this particular study. And in terms of literature, I first want to recognize the vast body of literature related to workplace learning, field-based learning, practica, and internships. This body of literature comes out of the trades and from professional fields such as nursing and teaching. One of my former PhD students, Nancy Logue, and a colleague in the Faculty of Nursing at UMB St. John, described the centrality of what nursing calls the preceptorship in this way. It promotes professional socialization, a synthesis of foundational abilities, and it reduces transition shock in new graduates. Pretty lofty. I wonder if we do the same in teacher ed. Far from a new concept in education. The idea that teacher candidates need time in the classrooms or other educational placements in order to put into practice their growing skills and knowledge about teaching has been part of the teacher education literature for more than 50 years. Sorry, take a breath. In its earliest form, the practicum was seen as an apprenticeship, a way to observe and learn the work of a teacher. When what is described in workplace learning literature as learning for work, at work, and through work, more recently, the practicum has been reframed as a reflective activity that encouraged teacher candidates to make connections between theory and practice. At its core, practice teaching has been seen as a way to help teacher candidates understand and respond to what Darling Hammond calls the dense and multifaceted nature of the classroom. Although no one seems to agree on the most effective ways to organize and roll out the practice teaching experience, experts do agree that it is an essential step in becoming a professional educator. So, the international internship now. There's a growing body of literature suggesting the benefits and the challenges. Although international experience can be, in many ways, provide the same sorts of learning, and you'll see that from some of our participants in the study, as a regular practicum experience in New Brunswick, some have suggested that there may be differences or additional learning possibilities. For example, Penson McGilvery stated that stepping outside of one's comfort zone and reflecting on one's reactions can help pre-service teachers become more flexible and reflective practitioners. Just keep that reflective part in mind, because I think something has to happen in order for that to happen. In a Canadian study, Maines and her colleagues reflected on a pre-service teaching experience in an African context and concluded they have made shifts in their worldviews toward more inclusive, compassionate, interdependent, and respectful understanding of another culture. Although this might seem like a very lofty claim, the literature does support the idea that these international experiences afford teachers the opportunity to build global awareness and an appreciation of other cultures, and the chance to connect with learners who may hold very different worldviews from their own. All right. So, as I said, this study has taken place, or has taken various shapes over the last 6 years. And as I said, Carla and I talked about this particular, some of the data I'm sharing with you tonight last year. But we also published an article in this magazine where I'm wearing the same shirt again, and in an article that a chapter we published in the Kate Working Conference book, and that was on the pilot year, actually. At the time, we focused on the learning journeys of participants and explored their expectations, experiences, and reflections before, during, and after the internship experience. Although it's common for many of our teacher candidates to now possess teaching and other experiences already before they come to us overseas, for some of our candidates, this was the first international experience of their entire lives. I mean, the first, not even to Bangor.
Or cows.
These preliminary data, the ones in the beginning years, really revealed both profound and not so profound ways in which their lives were impacted by this experience. At some point in time, Carla and I, due to, I think, our connections to language teaching and learning, we began to turn our attention to that particular lens. And I'm going to share some of the quotations with you this evening. And Carla's going to kindly help me with that part. You're going to have to help me, okay, in a moment. Okay, so that's the question that's going to guide us tonight. Actually, the title of the presentation, in addition to Jose twisting my rubber arm to do this, or maybe not so rubber, he also suggested a title that would attract the multitudes. So I am trying to take what I know and what's been shared with us, and then answer Jose's question about what the insights tell us more generally. Correct? Am I doing the right thing, Jose?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Okay, just something. All right. So, this table indicates the total number of participants that participated in the study, as well as those for whom ESL, English as the second language, or EAL, or French as the second language were their specialty areas. So these are people who participated in the study, because not everyone did, of course, and who also had, we've indicated here that the specialization, so that you would know those numbers as well. Because not everybody who went was a specialist in language teaching. The grayed out areas are those data which we have not yet analyzed. So in order to gather the data from participants, we asked them to take part in any of the following pieces of data collection. There was a pre-internship focus group where we focused on expectations, a during internship journal, which was on D2L, or by email, because some of them couldn't get access to D2L, and then there was a post-internship focus group, although last year we only did the focus group. And this evening I'm going to focus on that data, the data gathered from the focus groups. And I think that data is the most interesting, and I think that you will find that as well. Well, I actually don't know the other data, so I don't know how you're going to compare it, but trust me on this one, okay? I will briefly allude to some of their other, some of the pre-internship expectations or hopes or dreams or fears. Okay, so what did we find out? So I'm going to talk first about what we found out generally from our teacher candidates. Many of the teacher candidates viewed the international practicum as an opportunity for personal growth. Before the internship, they talked about the hope that the practicum would give them a chance to, and some of these words in my notes are bold and it's their actual words, to build confidence, to try something new, to take risks, and to open up new cultural learning, which one participant called large life experiences. After they returned, they shared how the experience developed their patience, took them out of their comfort zone, increased independence, proved their adaptability and perseverance, and enhanced their overall personal and professional profile in terms of work opportunities. I'm just going to put up some of the key terms here. In many ways, the international practicum presented similar challenges and rewards as a practicum in a Canadian context. In the focus group, they shared adventures in classroom management and the relationships they built with colleagues and students, which are very similar to the anecdotes that are shared with teacher candidates who stay put right here in New Brunswick. However, there were experiences that these participants had that were very different from what they experienced in their Canadian practicum. Different teaching styles, and that is still happening, and some of the journals that I'm reading right now are still talking about that. Different curriculum, for example, the International Baccalaureate. Different student behaviors, All of this contributes to making the international practicum a somewhat novel experience. Also, some of the data indicated that these pre-service teachers experienced, and this was very interesting to us, I think Carla remembers this as well, we were surprised when we reread the transcripts, that some of them felt a sense of autonomy that they did not feel in their New Brunswick practicum, and that they were treated more like colleagues internationally than at home. Relationships were mentioned by almost every teacher candidate in this study. Upon their return, those in the homestay spoke favorably about the support of these families and the positive matches they experienced. However, they also cautioned that if this match was not right, that it could have a very negative impact on their overall experience. Those who lived in the teacher's residence had mixed experiences, but all of them talked about how important it was to have at least one go-to friend or colleague. And how they also talked about creating an extended family in their Western bubble. That's a quotation. They all spoke about the connection between positive relationships with students and successful classroom management in the practicum. After returning from their international placements, students also shared cultural observations about education or life in the country. Some of them had a new appreciation for culture in which they were Some of them had a new appreciation for the culture in which they were living, and some formed new conceptions about students and schools. Some of these could be perceived as stereotypes, but in large part, these were communicated as empathy and new understandings. Now I'd like to share with you the three themes and the illustrative quotations that emerged from the second language teacher candidate data. Cultural experiences for language teachers, empathy for the language learners, and the language classroom. I'm going to do a little synopsis, and then I'm going to ask Carla if she wouldn't mind reading the quotations. I really like it when somebody reads them aloud. I think it gives voice to our participants. So, cultural experiences. In the past, the focus of culture in terms of second language and foreign language teaching was on developing cultural competencies related to the target culture in order to share this knowledge and passion with your students. Makes sense? While this remains an important component for language teachers, there is a growing emphasis on cross-cultural competencies to meet the needs and the interests of our increasingly multicultural language classrooms and to address the development of global competencies in our ever increasingly globalized world. Many of the teacher candidates specializing in second language teaching found that their international practicum was a way to increase their global awareness and their knowledge of a new culture. Often their reflections contained comparisons between their culture and the one in which they were embedded for 8 weeks, and sometimes they highlighted differences and sometimes similarities.
There are some things that are kind of funny about China, but once you wrap your head around them, I bet there are some funny things we do too. It's also really daunting to realize how many students have tragic stories, difficult circumstances, and rough family lives. In every country, in every school in the world, there are so many students with mental illness, anger, and personal issues that there just isn't enough time in the day to do everything for everyone. Teachers really are stretched thin and pulled in every direction. More of a cultural thing, more about how hope can change a country. I just felt how much everybody kept asking, how do you like this place? How do you feel? And how do you like this place? Because I think they want it to be a good place. They want to open it up to the world. They don't want to have this negative perception. My newsfeed on Facebook is still how this is the real Colombia. This is not about all the drugs and everything you hear about. They are real, going through a real bonding experience right now with the World Cup. I see that from the friends I've made. So I think that what I'll take away is a hope from an emerging nation. Everything they've been through, that is something I'll take away. Perseverance, I guess.
Thanks, Carla. So those two quotations were from interns in China, and this one was from a preschool teacher in Colombia. Empathy for language learners. One of the skills that some believe is crucial to being an effective second language teacher is being able to empathize with the language learning process. In methodology classes, we often try to encourage our teacher candidates to make connections between their own language learning and that of their future students, whether on an affective or cognitive level. This experience certainly gave some of our second language specialists a chance to build this empathy and increase their understanding of the emotional aspects of learning a second or additional language.
For me, because of French immersion, I thought Spanish would have been a bit different. That is, easier to pick up than Mandarin. I have traveled, but I haven't, that was the first time I've experienced not being able to communicate. And even though I could understand about 50%, I couldn't talk to them. I would just stand there like I have no idea. So it was hard for me because it was different. I understood some, but it was still something. You meet different people who speak different dialects of Spanish, and it just got really confusing, and I just tried to roll with it. And this is Mark. Yeah, similar to Tanya, but it was kind of funny when you would be in a restaurant and order something and then you might get something totally different. I think it's just being open-minded and kind of being open to that, but it's a good experience to be placed in that situation, especially if you're going to be a second language teacher, to realize how maybe difficult or frustrating it can be. I guess what goes through my mind is that I see ESL and international students from a whole different perspective. Now I know what it feels like to be the one not understanding what is going on, like for me to be the minority, like to have no idea. Most of the time, your students in the class were speaking back and forth and you had no idea what was going on. I now see things like from a whole different perspective because I know what it feels like to not understand and to not know what's going on and to be frustrated. I feel like I can help them more, like I understand their frustrations. I will be more willing to take the time and go the extra mile to help them.
This theme relates to the experiences that second language teacher candidates had in the classroom with managing various challenges of teaching additional languages. For example, the use of the first language, making content accessible to low-level proficiency, and multi-level classes. Many of our pre-service teachers found the second language aspect of their practicum both challenging and enlightening. In terms of professional growth, classroom management and finding strategies to make input more comprehensible for language learners were two of the most commonly cited challenges in the language classroom.
I was able to learn so much about teaching English. My grammar needed to be perfect because I had all of these students watching me write, listening to me speak, and so on. It really keeps you on your toes when you have an audience. I also learned to slow down my speech and enunciate my words. There were so many strategies I learned just from standing in front of the class and finding out what worked. I found that I could use the same strategies teaching reading to elementary students as I could for high school ESL students. I just needed to change the content they were reading. I also learned that there are very few resources out there for teaching ESL to high school students, where the reading isn't suited to very young children. I'm so happy I took this opportunity to go to China. Had I not, I don't think I would have found out how rewarding and how much I enjoyed teaching English as an additional language. I felt like doing all sorts of things. I was standing on the desk, and it worked, you know. Towards the end, we had teachers in there, we were dividing them up, and I can think of one in particular. He was a big guy, very low English, much lower than the normal in the class. He was very low. He was very defiant, obnoxious, and about halfway he was asleep. The first half was really rough, but towards the end we were having a laugh because he realized that we were dividing people and that he was going to have to go somewhere. So he just stands up and says, "I want to go with you." But to me, it was just like I had managed to break through this barrier that he had. Got more English out of him in that week than I had got the rest of the time. We had finally reached that point, but it was time to leave. I had made such headway with that guy that no one else was really getting there with him.
Thanks a lot, Carla.
You're welcome.
Before I move on to the conclusion, I just wanted to share some of the recent data, if I can call it that was sent to me in a journal written by one of our current second language teacher candidates doing an international internship. I asked for permission as I thought this quotation spoke well to this theme. "So far, the classes have proved in a number of ways to be remarkably similar to classes I was teaching in a small rural school in New Brunswick." Not naming the school. Many have the same issues with motivation, interest, or lack thereof, and a range of abilities. All are present here in this school as well, with one key difference. That school had virtually no EAL students, and that is, of course, extremely prevalent in my current international experience. This comment is pertinent on many levels, but it reminded me that we can have very different experiences in New Brunswick schools as well. New Brunswick is changing. Our schools are changing. There are still some schools like the one that was mentioned, but many of our classrooms here are also multilingual and multicultural with varying language levels. And I just thought this reflection was really interesting and something that I want to pursue further. So, what does the international internship mean for teacher candidates and for language teacher candidates? Whether it's teaching in an international context or teaching in a multicultural Canadian classroom, being able to have an interest in, an understanding of, and an empathy for the variety of learners in our classroom is not an asset, it's a necessity. The international experiences definitely gave these teacher candidates a window into other cultures. Chinese and Colombian specifically. However, because of the nature of the international schools, some of these teacher candidates were exposed to many other cultures as well. It gave these beginning teachers an opportunity to reflect on their own culture, to realize who they are, and what culture they bring to the table. That was a very interesting turn, we thought. The data collected shows that the experience was definitely in line with all the workplace learning and all that a workplace learning and practicum should be. To quote Darling Hammond again, it gave them insights into the dense and multifaceted nature of the classroom. However, these insights from these particular pre-service teachers demonstrated that the international practicum added something more in the way of cultural experiences, a growing sense of empathy for language learners, and a deeper understanding of language teaching. In our writings, we've called this Practicum Plus. Moreover, some of the beneficial elements are also, in many ways, those which presented the most challenges. Experiences such as feeling out of their cultural comfort zone, language barriers, and frustrations related to relationships, to classroom management, and to other items that stemmed from cultural and linguistic misunderstandings were viewed in retrospect as the most poignant learning experiences. So now, allow me to return to the question that Jose posed. Why should students in applied programs do international internships? I'd like to say that I do not necessarily think that this is an experience that all students must have or would necessarily want. In my interactions with teacher candidates, I encourage this opportunity for those who might express interest or who ask questions or for whom the opportunity might be beneficial. For example, my EAL specialists. Also, I do not believe that it is exclusively an opportunity for those who already have shown a propensity for travel and adventure. In fact, some of the participants for whom this was the most meaningful are those who had very little international exposure. With that being said, I believe these insights from teacher candidates do show us how an experience such as this can contribute to professional and personal growth. For these participants, it came in the form of a growing awareness of their own capacities and of their ability to see beyond the familiar and the comfortable. This study did in many ways echo the findings in previous studies in terms of expanding worldviews and cultural understandings. However, while all these data do not perhaps speak to a truly transformative experience, we can't really say that, but they do demonstrate a movement toward openness and an affirmation of the desire to continue broadening their perspectives. Another little word of caution is that almost all the participants in this study spoke about how imperative it was for them to feel supported by their host institutions or by their fellow colleagues. Thankfully, the overwhelming majority, not everyone in our study, was grateful for the fact that this was true of their experience. Therefore, to conclude, I just want to say that if these experiences are well organized, which they often are, and if the students feel well supported, international internships can be excellent occasions for learning and development. Also, following these internships with meaningful opportunities for reflection is imperative. Sessions held with the faculty and the participation in this study were useful in that regard. And finally, I just want to say that I believe that an international internship can provide everyone involved, not just those going, but those receiving, an enriching, educational, and enjoyable opportunity to interact and learn with new people and in new contexts. Thank you.
I think we have about 20 minutes for Q&A.
Yes, Jeff?
So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that you've probably supervised students in New Brunswick too, right?
I've only supervised. I haven't actually had the opportunity to supervise the interns abroad.
Have you worked with the international students though?
I've worked with them in three capacities, I guess. I've worked with them in the context of their ESL methodology courses, if they did take those. I worked with them in the context of the program in general, and Carla and I, in the context of the study, we interacted with them before, during, and after their internship.
I've seen them in this place.
But I have not actually been to Colombia or China to see, I have been to China, but not to see them in action.
I just need to know that you've seen both sets of students.
I
Not
have seen them,
necessarily.
I've talked to them,
Perfect.
and
Okay.
they're still talking to me.
So here's my question.
Yeah.
Are there differences that you can see between the traits, characteristics, skills that the international students have and the students that stay here? The successful ones?
It's a good question. Are there differences in their like their traits and their attributes?
Like when you think about the ones who go to the international schools,
Yeah.
and then think about the ones that you supervise here,
Mm-hmm.
are they different students? Could you categorize the ones that go off and do international?
I'm going to say, but my colleagues may disagree with me,
That's fine.
one of them being your wife. I'm going to
She's
say,
disagreed with me before.
I'm going to say no. She what?
She's disagreed with me before.
Oh, really? I'm going to say no. Like there are lots of students who stay put in New Brunswick and do their full practicum here. who would possess characteristics that would probably have made them successful in their international practicum.
In fact, lots of them
But-
spent years teaching over there.
And as Alan just said, many of them have already had years, and which is part of the reason actually, some of them came into our program this year for just exclusively because they knew we had an international internship, and then realized, oh well, I've already done that anyway, and I really want to know how to teach here in New Brunswick, so I'm going to stay here. Even though they came here with the full intention of going international.
So forgive me for asking a poor question, because that's really what I wanted to know. What are these things that the ones that you're saying are well suited for international education? What are the things they have?
To be completely frank, we did not, that wasn't part of our study. Like, that's my honest answer. But there are things we think and that the literature says about those who are successful in those experiences. And it doesn't necessarily mean they've been abroad before, but like there are questions on the form. I'm looking at Catherine, sorry. I mean, she can speak to, there are questions on the form like, that speak to things like their open-mindedness and their, like the forms that we fill out as faculty rep and instructors, that getting at the reference forms, are getting at those kind of like, are they flexible, and are they able to handle challenges without getting, I'm paraphrasing completely here, without getting too upset? Can they handle change? And I mean, it's hard to judge that as an instructor, but you do get a sense of some of that, and their ability to handle stress, for sure. Catherine, go ahead. Yeah.
I think what it is, Jeff, so what you're asking is we do look at what students' intercultural competencies are, and there's an entire research on intercultural competencies for people who go and work and live overseas. There's 9 traits, we look at those. So there's a whole background in terms of the questions that we ask, but the biggest piece for us is, are they successful right now here in their practicum here in New Brunswick? And that's the questions that we ask about. So I can talk to you about that further afterwards, whether it has to do with qualification or not.
Yeah, and Josie, at Renaissance, you do that pre-screening before they even come into the program, because they are going to on international internship. And you look at what kinds of things?
Well, it's typically students that are interested in traveling, and then they're attracted to the program because of that. So they're students that typically are fairly adventurous to start with.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily mean us in their application. Like, we're not looking specifically for an adventurous person, and I'm open-minded.
Right.
But they're typically students that are involved in their communities. They're active already. They know that this is part of it. So.
Okay.
But they get a lot of preparation before they go. That helps get them ready. They do a whole course in cross-cultural leadership and understanding, and the preparation for going on their internship is quite extensive.
Okay. Dave and Alan?
First of all, I'll make my register my guess on the statue of Christopher Columbus in Seville. Okay, then the question.
Of course you'd still be thinking about that.
I wasn't thinking about it, I wrote it down.
No, I know, but that's,
Was he right though?
no.
Then I'm not going to ask the same question, I'll have to argue. No, I'm just kidding.
It
Okay.
doesn't matter, it's irrelevant.
I'm thinking about the
Think about the
context
city.
of the placements, and how different they could potentially be in international placements,
Yeah.
internships. And so you identified qualities of experience or qualities of learning or whatever for the interns, which align to some extent with what you found in the literature. So what I'm wondering about is what kinds of contexts lend themselves more to what kinds of learning and experience, distinct from other contexts that would lend themselves more to different learnings and experiences.
I think I understand the question. You said something, can I just pick one little thing that you said, that one of the places we haven't gone with this yet is comparing the two locales of our international practicum. But Carla and I know, I can tell you this definitively, that there is a huge difference between the two internships. Are there some of the same outcomes? Yes. But the fact that our Colombian students, well, not our Colombian students, but our students who go to Colombia are living in homestay, the fact that our teachers in China are living in a teacher's residence, Colombia is very different from China, and China is actually extremely multicultural because a lot of them are in international schools. Actually, there's a huge difference between the students who went to the international schools and those who went to the national schools, so like the Concord College. So, I mean, I know that's not where you were going with that, but I just wanted to say that we haven't gone there yet, but there are some differences there with that data. Now, back to what you really asked. Can you say it again? Sorry.
Well, not word for word.
No,
but because I worded it so perfectly the first time. No,
it is true.
Well, it's hard to actually ask the question in a clear way because I don't want to identify what qualities in a context I would foreground as being likely to be impactful in what kind of learning it is. So I'm just telling you that I'm interested in what qualities in a context would affect the qualities of the experience that we're learning to make them distinct from each other.
The qualities of the context, and that's why I started going on that tangent. The qualities of the context, meaning the geographic context.
Well,
the school, the educational context.
The demographic mostly, I would think.
Yeah.
And the way the intern perceives the context.
Oh yeah.
Like the one that I'm thinking about as the most likely to be impactful to impact the kind of learning and experience would be whether the intern sees the context as being more privileged or less privileged than their default context, which would be New Brunswick.
Right. Okay. Yeah. There were things that they said before they left. I'm just going to give you an example. So a lot of them think that in China, all students sit and pay attention to the teacher all the time, and there's never any classroom management issues, and they just hang on your every word, and they're polite, and on and on. So some of them went with that, even though we tried to say that wasn't, that idea was in their head. And some of the quotations, I think you could see that they were really surprised at some of the behaviors that they witnessed. So perhaps going with the idea, maybe they have a preconceived notion that, I'm going to China, it's going to be super easy there to teach because my, middle school in wherever is crazy, but this is going to be a piece of cake. I don't know if any of them thought that exactly, but there were certainly some eye-opening experiences. So if they go with those kind of ideas in their mind, sometimes those get really shifted. And I have actually, and I know Catherine has, and Carla has, and Kim has too probably, we've tried to, based on a lot of this data that we've been collecting, tell them, don't go with those kind of ideas in your head. And maybe with Colombia, thinking that there were you saw one of the quotations from a person who went to Colombia and how Colombia has an image in some people's minds, right, of drug lords and drugs and that kind of thing. And that was completely shifted around because they are working really hard to shift that. And they really want our students to believe that is true, that the country is changing. So I don't know, Dave, I know I'm not answering your question exactly right, but are there dispositions that you go with that would be necessary for the context? I don't think they're any different from the dispositions we need when we go into any kind of practicum. We need to be just ready for whatever comes at. I don't know. I'm not answering your question. My cold medication is really actually wearing off now. So I don't know, Dave. I don't think I'm answering your question properly. Maybe somebody else can answer it. Can somebody else answer Dave's question? He always asks hard questions. Alan?
Well, it's kind of a follow-up, so they don't make it harder. I have friends that teach at the American school in Shanghai, and they've been there 7 years. I don't think they've ever been to China. And I visited them several times, and that's what I'm worried about this. I'm a big supporter of our international internships. I came to both the schools. Do they talk about the wider socio-cultural context and some of their own complicity in that context? Right. So, for example, the picture you have of Mac at the end.
Yeah.
If Mac looks up, he's there with some of the most privileged young men in Colombia. He's in a bubble. That school's a very elite school. These guys are going to be the senators and congress people and everybody else. And if he looks up from that spot, he will see a favela in the mountains around him, a swamp. Colombia has the biggest income disparity in Latin America. Colombia has huge issues with peasant farmers being forced off the land by extraction industries largely owned by Canadians. Do we have a responsibility to introduce them to that context? That's one question I have, and the other question I have is, do they talk about that context? Do they go to Colombia, or do they stay at the Capistero? Because the Capistero is not Colombia.
They don't stay there. They stay there. I actually know this because Mac talked about this a lot, because they actually did a field trip to a local
The
school.
school does volunteer work in that very place.
Exactly.
So they go there all the time.
So they went on a regular basis to, and oh, I have to tell you, just before I came here, one of our pre-service teachers wrote me a big long email, and she said, I asked her if it was okay to share this, and she said it was. They had gone on a like an excursion with her host family, and they went and they stayed in a native village, and she said the poverty, and they stayed there for the night, and she was in shock. She has never, and this is somebody who has seen a lot and grew up in Montreal, and she could not believe the poverty that she saw and she said, in comparison to the lives of my boys at school. So they are seeing it, and they are making those, I don't know what they're making of them. Like, I can't speak to it like, I don't know if they're having some kind of an, enlightenment because of this, but they're definitely seeing it. And in China, the same thing, and especially when we had students out at Concord College, I mean, and some of those quotations come from our students that were at Concord College, and they talked about the real China all the time, because they would go into the international school and they would say, like, there is no comparison here, for good or for bad. But it is not. It's the real China, right? I mean, that's what they called it. So I don't know if they're making something of that, or if they've come back, I don't know, scarred or enlightened.
I guess
but
for me, that's part of the purpose of the program. It's not just about schools and teaching. It's about the world.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Them coming to a deeper understanding of the world. And I don't. The school is real Colombia. Those are Colombians. That's real Colombia.
That was the quotation, by the way.
To be a real Colombian, right? But Colombia is a very diverse place.
Yeah, that's as real as.
I guess, and the same. I mean, I don't think the international school is Chinese at all.
It's not.
If you stay in the international school and stay in the teacher residence, you'd be like my friends who've been in Shanghai 7 years and never been to China. right? So, but it's real.
It's still real.
It's a part of the world, and do they understand what part of the world it is, right? Because one of the things I saw in there is, in some of the quotes, I don't know what the right term is, but there's this kind of very kind of colonial Western mentality that we're bringing stuff here that people don't have, and that's what we do. And I want that troubled for them. I don't want that to stop. I don't want us to stop going, but I want them to have problems with that.
And I think that in the focus group, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Carla, but they did question themselves and each other, and I don't think that they were accepting that necessarily that Western view of everything. In fact, I think actually, I would argue, some of those quotations show a turn away from that colonial mentality. To be honest, I think so. Not like I can't say it was like a transformation, but I do think there was some.
Short time for transformation.
Yeah. A start. Yeah, beginning. Roger.
Do you have any sense of why those schools want Canadian student teachers, or teacher candidates, or why do they want them from us? Which may be a different way into a point Alan's trying to make, I don't know. But why do they want people from here?
Because we're awesome. Why do they want? I think
Why
they
does that
want.
Colombian school need a Canadian?
Well, they want people. Well, I'll tell you one reason, and Catherine, you can back me up or tell me I'm full of it.
No, you're
They. Oh, I'm outside of the.
No, you're good. It's okay. It's okay.
They.
Canadian International Schools.
Yes, it's the Canadian, like the AEI is
Education International.
right. They're Canadian schools, right? They're in other places, but in China they are. So they want Canadian teachers. So it's a recruitment strategy. I mean, come on. Of course there's that. Of course there's that. Because they've hired some of our students. You can't hide behind that, right? And I think that they appreciate, there's a two-way appreciation for the experience. They feel like they've got something to contribute. But I mean, there is a recruitment.
I can also add to that, Roger, is that the schools that we go to, so in Shanghai, Hefei, Shenzhen, the Canadian International Schools and the Concord College schools, they have, just like here, how our schools have pre-service teachers. So they have them as well. It is part of their administration, it is part of how they have their schools, so it's not that we are the only ones going. There are other universities from all across Canada that go as well. The partnership started because there is, as Paula mentioned, a recruitment piece. The Canadian International Schools are all Canadian administration, and so you have principals and administrators that are from Bathurst and Miramichi and St. John. And so they know the quality of our students that are coming. Some of them are UMB grads themselves. And so it's an extension of having pre-service teachers in their schools. They see that also as a very good thing for their schools, for their students to be exposed to English-speaking teachers, pre-service teachers. The partnership that we have in China with Gymnasia Campestre, they actually send every year 35 to 40 of their students, boys, to Canada for a term to be all over New Brunswick and to learn English and to do that. So the reciprocal piece of the homestays are that our students, some of those families have had their kids who are in grade 7, grade 8, come and live in New Brunswick for a term. And so it's a reciprocal piece, it's a partnership piece that happens. And so that's why they're there. And then the spin-off piece of that is, or not the spin-off, that's not what I mean, but the positive piece of that is that these are schools that are hiring teachers. And it's an opportunity for our students that go to gain the experience, also an opportunity for the schools themselves to have first English-speaking teachers and pre-service teachers that they already have in their schools, just like we do here in New Brunswick.
Yeah, I mean, there's all those reasons. I mean, I assume that they have that, like some schools here have that desire to give back to the profession, right, and to mentor new teachers the same way that happens everywhere. I assume that must be part of it too. Not very many of them. I mean, some of them go and work, but not high numbers. So it can't be just that, and they keep doing it.
What do you mean, like what's the numbers for, we've had 47 students go and about 26 have gone and worked internationally.
Yeah, so it's not, and it's not,
At the end of
it's
the year,
internationally, it's
we'll
not necessarily at those schools. So, yeah.
Like they've gone to Bangladesh and Thailand and Dubai, like outside of Colombia or China.
Mhm.
So I think we have time for one more question.
In addition to the question of who's 16-year-old Paula's.
What about
Oh, yeah, the
16-year-old
statue.
Paula?
Statue,
18.
18-year-old Paula.
It's shot Cartier in Quebec City.
Oh, was there a
That's the
question?
right idea with explaining.
Yes, I think there was. Yes, Alan, sorry.
Do you think there would be any potential, would it be a good idea for our faculty to expand this initiative by expanding out of
Yep,
these kinds of protected schools, so that
Yeah.
students might have an experience in a national school?
yep,
In a place, anywhere in the world, but in a school that's not a kind of elite school or an international school, but
Mhm.
to teach in a place, obviously, for most of them, they'll have to be in English, or somebody wants to learn English. but-
yeah. I mean, Joe and Carla just
I know
got back
part
from
of the
Norway
issue
and,
is the New Brunswick government has to have a relationship with the school before they'll count the time, but I think we can maybe work with them. Would it be a good idea to expand to that kind?
yeah, well, I was just gonna say, Joe and Carla just got back from Norway, and they're interested in having our pre-service teachers there. So, it might, that might be another option, I don't know. We got an email the other day that there's possible opportunities to do practica in French-speaking locales, not in Canada. That might be an option, who knows? I don't know. The agreement we have is specific, so, yeah. There are certain players there that allow this to happen. And there's funding also behind that, right? Because people can't go on their own dime, right? So this is another piece of the puzzle we've got to.
Mark and Jeff are just back from PEI.
PEI,
And their
that's an
teachers
international
go
locale.
to a range of national schools in various parts of the world, right?
Mhm.
Do they fund themselves, or do they have funding?
They do a lot of fundraising.
Fundraising, yeah.
Students, that's part of the program.
Catherine does a
You
lot
go,
of
Catherine, on that
fundraising. She's doing this. That was the international
I don't
sign for
think.
stop
I don't
the live
think.
feed, not, yeah, so I don't know. I mean, yes, there may be other opportunities down the road. I don't know. They have to be explored, and, I mean, we have to have partnerships, right, that are gonna work, so, I don't know.
All right, so moving to the next portion.
The next portion.
Yes, yeah, the portion with food.
Oh, that portion,
So just as
all
a
right.
reminder to everybody that the evening doesn't have to be over, although for anybody that's live streaming, I think the evening will be over. But if you have additional questions or want to chat with Paula more on a one-on-one basis, we have food and drinks. Sometimes coffee and tea, though last time they didn't actually provide that, I don't think. In the lounge, I forget I think it's room 224 or something. Anyway, it's down the corridor.
Some room
this
down
way.
there.
Follow the faculty members who know the way there. Yeah, so for a little bit more of a chat in a more relaxed setting. Also, Paula, I wanted to thank you with this lovely plaque, which provides further evidence that she only ever wears one outfit. Just before we end, the final colloquium presentation of the year will be, when is it? Tuesday, May 9th, and it will be Francis Halar, who's an associate professor from Lakehead University, talking about, and I apologize for butchering the French, toujours des ravages, language and Acadian education in New Brunswick, 1900 to 1940. So hopefully you'll be able to come to that as well. All right.
Thanks, Jose.
I
don't know if I screwed something up.